The morning I disappeared from her life, I wasn't planning to. I wasn't even planning to leave the house. I was standing in the kitchen holding a cracked mug full of cold coffee, barefoot, wearing the same shirt I'd slept in, listening to her blow-dry her hair in the next room like we didn't share a marriage that had quietly bled out somewhere between the laundry and the grocery lists. She hadn't said good morning. Not that I expected her to. She'd stopped greeting me like a human months ago. But that morning? That morning was different because of what wasn't said. You know how silence can scream? That day, it was how she opened the fridge, saw the orange juice was gone, and closed it harder than necessary. How she walked past me without a glance, as if I were a faded piece of furniture someone had been meaning to throw out for years. So I set the mug down. I didn't even finish the coffee. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door without my shoes. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't take my phone. You might think that's stupid, walking out barefoot like some lunatic, like a guy in a midlife crisis who forgot how doors work. But it felt honest. It felt like the only real thing I'd done in months. We hadn't fought. That was the strangest part. There was no explosion, no dramatic final straw. She just stopped responding. Emotionally, physically, spiritually, like I was talking into an unplugged microphone every day. I'd ask, "Do you want to go out for dinner tonight?" She'd say, "I already ate." I'd say, "How was work?" She'd nod. I'd say, "You okay?" She'd scroll. You want to know when I realized something had truly snapped? 2 nights before I walked out, I cut my hand trying to fix the bathroom sink. Not a paper cut, a deep one. There was blood, a lot of it. I called her name, panicked. She walked in, looked at my hand, then at the clock, and said, "Do you need me to call someone? Or are you just trying to prove something?" I told her I was bleeding. She told me she was tired. That was our marriage. I bled. She yawned. So yeah, the morning I walked out barefoot made more sense than staying another day waiting for her to blink in my direction. I made it 3 blocks before realizing I was still carrying the house key. I dropped it in a stranger's mailbox. I wish I could say that's where it ends. Guy walks away, finds peace, reinvents himself, slow motion montage with a better haircut. But real life is messy, eh? Because 3 days later, I saw her at the grocery store, laughing, with a man I didn't recognize. And in her hand? The same cracked mug I thought I left on our kitchen counter. I thought I was the one who disappeared. Turns out, I was erased. I stood at the end of aisle 7, paralyzed between a row of breakfast cereals and the reality I never asked for. She was laughing. Not the forced kind she'd been giving me for years, not that closed mouth, please don't ask me what's wrong kind of laugh. No, this was full-bodied, open, loud. She threw her head back and touched his arm the way she used to touch mine when we were still something. That mug, our old mug, the one with the chip near the rim that she refused to throw away because it was perfectly imperfect, was now cradled in her hand like a goddamn trophy. I didn't even know I was holding a box of oatmeal until I dropped it. It hit the floor with a dull slap, and for a second, her eyes darted toward the sound. For half a breath, I thought she saw me, but she didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She looked right past me, like I was air, or a stranger, or both. I left without buying anything. I walked all the way back to the motel I'd been crashing in, a place that smelled like bleach and regret. The kind of place with vending machines that eat your dollar and carpet that looks like it remembers every footstep. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall, trying to figure out what hurt more, the fact that she'd moved on so effortlessly, or the possibility that maybe she hadn't even needed time to grieve. Maybe she hadn't grieved at all. Later that night, I did something weak. I won't pretend otherwise. I logged into our old shared email. Yeah, she never changed the password. She probably didn't think I'd remember it. But I did. I remember everything. Her favorite song, the way she hated cilantro, how she used to hum under her breath when she did laundry. There it was. A thread of messages with someone named Logan F. Dozens of emails, some recent, some dating back months. And that's when I realized I hadn't been living with a wife. I'd been living with a ghost who had already packed up emotionally and handed her heart to someone else while leaving me the shell. One message stood out. I still see it in my head like neon. He doesn't ask questions anymore. It's like he's already gone. Maybe that's for the best. No, I didn't scream. I didn't smash anything. I just sat there, my hand shaking, rereading it like maybe the meaning would change if I blinked enough. I was already gone. I was still paying bills, still feeding the dog, still folding her laundry because I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd notice I cared. And then another email. 2 weeks before I left. Once I say it to his face, I think it'll be real. I just need the guts to do it. She didn't say it because she was brave. She said it because she had backup. I felt pathetic. Stupid. Like some underpaid extra in a story I thought I was the main character of. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above me in slow, hypnotic circles. I thought about going back. Not to fight. Not to yell. Just to ask her one thing. When did she stop seeing me? But I didn't go back. I couldn't. Because I knew if I stood in that doorway again, she wouldn't see a husband. She'd see an inconvenience. A shadow she forgot to delete. So I did something worse. I booked a room for the week in the same motel, kept my car parked 2 blocks away from the house, and for the first time in my life, I started watching the woman I loved from a distance. Not for revenge. Not out of hate. Just to figure out how she did it. How she erased me so cleanly. But what I saw next, in the dark, through rain-streaked glass and headlights, that changed everything. The first night I parked down the block, I told myself I was just going to sit there for a few minutes. I convinced myself it wasn't stalking, that it wasn't creepy, that I was just observing. Like an outsider revisiting a museum of his own past. The street looked the same, sleepy, suburban, painfully ordinary. Same flickering street lamp at the corner. Same rusted mailbox with a dent from when I backed into it with the mower. But nothing felt familiar anymore. The house looked staged, like it was part of a brochure for a life I no longer qualified for. Around 9 p.m., the living room light flicked on. Through the sheer curtains, I saw movement, shadows at first, and then her silhouette. Corinne. She was wearing one of my old sweatshirts, the navy one with the frayed cuffs and faded logo from our beach trip 5 years ago. The one she used to call her comfort shirt. I felt something split inside me when I realized she still wore it, not because she missed me, but because it was convenient. Then I saw him. He walked in from the kitchen holding a glass of wine. Casual. Like he belonged there. Like he'd been there before. They stood close, not touching, but the kind of close that says touching is inevitable. He handed her the glass. She took it, smiling. They talked for a while, and then, just like that, she laughed again. That same laugh I heard in the grocery store. Big, unfiltered, real. A laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in over 2 years. My heart didn't break that night. No, it did something worse. It stopped trying. I didn't sleep. I sat in that car till morning, not even feeling the ache in my legs or the chill in my chest. Just watching. Thinking. Reliving every conversation, every dinner, every ignored text and half-hearted kiss, and realizing none of it had been shared anymore. I'd been loving her alone for years. The next day, I watched them leave together. Same car. Same direction. Her hair was pulled back in a way I hadn't seen in months. Neat. Elegant. Like she was trying for him. Trying in ways she had stopped trying for me. That one hurt more than I thought it would. Later, I drove by my old office building. I wasn't there to go in. I had already quit that job weeks ago, long before Corinne's confession. I just wanted to see it. To prove to myself that it still existed, that some version of my old life still had a pulse. But even that felt hollow. The building stood tall, glassy, and indifferent, like a reflection of everything I was no longer a part of. I didn't tell anyone where I was. Not my sister, not my old coworker Thomas, who still texts me every Friday asking if I'm alive out there. I didn't even answer. What could I say? Yeah, Tom. I'm good. Just watching my wife build a new life in the ruins of mine. I spent another night in the car. This time, I parked a little closer. I didn't bother pretending it was for anything noble. I was desperate. Desperate to understand how someone could stop loving you without warning. Without ceremony. Without closure. But on the third night, that's when things turned. I saw Corinne leave the house alone. She looked rushed, nervous. She got into her car, started the engine, and drove off. I waited, expecting him to appear next. But he didn't. The house stayed dark for over an hour. And then the lights flicked on again, upstairs this time. A shadow moved across the curtain, but it wasn't hers. It was a third person, someone I didn't recognize. I leaned forward, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It didn't match anything I expected. Corinne wasn't supposed to be gone. That man wasn't supposed to still be there. And whoever this new figure was, they weren't supposed to exist in my story at all. And that was the moment I realized something deeply wrong was happening inside the life I thought I'd already lost. I hadn't even begun to understand what I'd been erased from. Because the truth? It was darker than I imagined. I hadn't moved in nearly 40 minutes. My legs were numb, my eyes burning from the kind of focus that turns into obsession. But that didn't matter, because someone was upstairs in what used to be my bedroom. A tall figure, broader than the man she'd been with the previous nights, pacing back and forth in front of the window like he was waiting for something or someone. The curtain moved again. He pulled it aside, just slightly, and for a split second, I thought our eyes met. But I was far enough, shielded by the night and my own cowardice. Still, it jolted me. I felt like I'd been spotted, even if logically I knew I hadn't. I didn't recognize him. That was the part that chilled me most. He wasn't the guy from the grocery store, or the one with the wine glass. This was someone new. Someone out of place. He didn't walk like a partner making himself at home. He moved like a man casing a place. Confident, deliberate, but with an edge. Something about him felt off, like he didn't belong in a house full of soft rugs and scented candles. Like the walls themselves weren't sure what to make of him. I waited for Corinne to return, but she didn't. Midnight passed. Then 1. Then 2. The stranger stayed upstairs the entire time. At 2:17 a.m., the light in the bedroom flicked off. I didn't see him leave. I didn't see the door open. But suddenly, the house was dark again, quiet like a sealed vault. That silence wasn't peaceful. It was unnerving, thick, waiting, coiled. And for the first time since I started this sad little nightly ritual, I didn't feel just heartbroken. I felt afraid. The next morning, I drove to the nearby strip mall under the excuse of grabbing a coffee. But what I really wanted was to talk to someone. Anyone who might know something. That's when I ran into Mrs. Nolan, the nosy neighbor 2 doors down. Retired school teacher, mid-70s, always watering her hydrangeas like they were state secrets. I approached with caution, just trying to be casual. Hey, haven't seen you around much. How's the street been? She tilted her head, surprised to see me, then frowned. Darrell, you okay? Sweetheart? I thought you moved. I gave her a half smile and mumbled something about needing space, and then I asked the question that had been drilling into me all night. Have you noticed anyone new around the house? Her eyes lit up. Oh yes. I was just telling Myra Corinne's got a lot of company lately. Different cars. Some guy in a work van. Some guy in a suit. One even parked on my lawn like he owned the whole street. I swallowed hard. You recognize any of them? She shook her head. No, but I'm not one to pry. Still, it's a lot of traffic for someone who used to be so private, you know? Almost like she's running something out of the house. Her words hit me like ice down my back. That night, I came back early. I parked at the same spot, but this time I had binoculars, a ridiculous, desperate move, I admit, but I needed to see. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. At exactly 9:12 p.m., another car pulled up. This one was different, blacked out windows, no plates on the front. A man got out. Tall, wiry, hoodie pulled up even though it was warm. He didn't knock. He went straight around the back. 2 minutes later, the upstairs light flicked on again. The same bedroom window. My bedroom. He stayed there for nearly an hour. At 10:05, the front door opened. Corinne walked in, alone, carrying takeout bags like it was just another night. Normal. Routine. She didn't seem surprised that someone was already there. Didn't look around. Didn't pause. She'd known he'd be inside. I sat there, stunned, watching a version of her I didn't recognize anymore. This wasn't the woman I had shared toothbrush drawers with. This wasn't the woman who cried at dog commercials and used to fall asleep mid-sentence when she was exhausted. This was someone colder, sharper, methodical. And then came the moment that truly broke me. At 11:42, another man arrived. Not the same one. A third. And she greeted him with a kiss at the door, a long, slow one. Like that was the real her. And I was the ghost. I started to put the pieces together. Slowly. Horribly. Because this wasn't just about her moving on. It wasn't about some affair, or some rebound, or even about love. It was something else entirely. Something bigger. Something she never wanted me to know. But I was about to find out. Because the very next day, someone slipped an envelope under my motel door. No return address. No note. Just one photo inside. And when I saw what was in it, my stomach dropped. She had lied about everything. The envelope was thin. No markings, no writing. Just a plain manila shell slid under the door like it belonged there. For a while, I just stared at it from across the room. I didn't rush over. I didn't tear it open. I just watched it like it might move on its own. I knew, with that quiet, heavy certainty that settles in your gut, that whatever was inside wasn't going to make my day better. Still, I walked over, sat down, picked it up. Inside, There was only one thing, a photo. A printed, high-resolution photo on glossy paper, like it came straight from a security feed or a private investigator's report. Corinne, in our house, standing in front of the kitchen window. And behind her, just over her shoulder, was a man. But not one of the ones I'd seen through the bedroom curtain. This one was different, older, bearded, with a tattoo on his neck shaped like a pair of wings. He was wearing surgical gloves. His face was calm, too calm, and in his hand, just barely visible at the edge of the photo, was something that looked like a gun case. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself I was misinterpreting. Maybe it was a toolbox. Maybe it was something innocent. But deep down, I knew. It didn't feel like some one-time visitor. It felt like a signal, a warning from someone who had eyes where I thought I was hidden. And the question that screamed the loudest was, who knew where I was? I hadn't told anyone, not even my sister. I paid in cash for the motel. I used an old email to book anything online. I thought I was invisible, a man who had removed himself from the wreckage quietly. But someone was watching me. Someone wanted me to see that photo. I flipped it over. Nothing on the back. Not even a smudge. But tucked into the corner of the envelope was a small post-it note I'd missed earlier. 2 words. Block letters. All caps. Stay gone. That night, I didn't go back to the house. I stayed inside, lights off, phone off, door bolted. I sat in the corner of the room gripping the photo like it held some kind of spell, like if I stared long enough, I'd be able to decode the real story behind it. What was Corinne involved in? Who were these men? And why did I feel like I'd just stepped out of a failed marriage and into the middle of something criminal? I didn't sleep. My thoughts ran in circles so fast they turned into noise. But I couldn't stop thinking about that wing tattoo. I'd seen it before. Years ago. A wedding we went to, her cousin's, I think. There was a guy there with that exact same mark on his neck. I didn't know him well, but I remembered him being around for a while afterward. Always lingering at events. Always joking with Corinne like they shared some private language I wasn't part of. The name hit me around 3:30 a.m. Elias. She used to call him E. Just E. I'd asked her once if they'd ever dated. She laughed and said, not even close. That man is allergic to commitment. That was the end of it. I didn't question it again. I didn't think I needed to. I trusted her. Like a fool. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't sit in that motel room anymore. If someone was watching me, I needed to know who. I drove to the only person I thought might have a connection to all this, Serena, one of Corinne's oldest friends. She and I never clicked, really. She always had this way of looking at me like I wasn't quite what Corinne deserved. But she was sharp. And if there were cracks in Corinne's version of the truth, Serena would know. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. Darrell. I didn't bother pretending. I held up the photo. Her face drained of color like I'd shown her a ghost. Where did you get that? She whispered. I don't know. It was slipped under my door last night. She stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind her, and spoke in a hushed, panicked voice. You shouldn't have come here. You really shouldn't have. I thought you were out of town. What is this, Serena? What's going on? Who is that guy? She didn't answer right away. Just shook her head. I scanning the street. I can't be involved in this. In what? She looked me dead in the eye. You didn't leave soon enough. Then she went back inside and locked the door. I stood there, stunned. Everything felt wrong. The world I'd known, my marriage, my home, even the silence of the motel room, had twisted into something unrecognizable. And that's when I made my biggest mistake. I decided to go back to the house one last time. Not to confront her. Not to scream or beg or ask for answers. Just to see her. Just to see if I could still recognize the woman I'd once loved. Maybe I was hoping I'd find proof that I was wrong about all of it. But what I found instead, I'll never forget it. Because I wasn't the only one who showed up that night. It was almost midnight when I pulled onto the street I swore I wouldn't see again. The whole way there, I kept telling myself this was just for closure. Just a final glance through the window of my former life. To prove to myself that it was really over. That she had changed and I hadn't imagined any of it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. I was chasing something. Maybe not her, but the last flicker of meaning in a story that had slipped out of my hands long before I realized the pages were missing. I parked 2 blocks down and walked. The air was still, not silent. You could hear insects and the occasional hum of a distant car, but it had that tight, eerie quiet that makes you feel like the sky itself is holding its breath. When I reached the house, I stayed in the shadows near the tree across the street. The porch light was off. No car in the driveway. Curtains closed. From the outside, it looked like no one was home. I waited 15 minutes, maybe more, crouched low, heart pounding in a way that made me feel sick. But then I noticed something. The upstairs window, our old bedroom, had a faint flicker of light pulsing behind the curtain. Not steady, not bright, like the glow from a TV or a screen. Someone was up there. I should have walked away. I knew that. Everything in me said leave. But curiosity is a sickness when you've been lied to long enough. You stop trusting facts and start needing to see things for yourself. I crossed the street. It felt surreal standing at the front door, like I was robbing my own memories. I didn't plan to go in. I just wanted to look through the window near the side path that ran along the house. Maybe hear her voice. Maybe catch a glimpse of her and remind myself that I didn't belong there anymore. I stepped carefully, trying not to make noise, and reached the side window, the one that looked into the living room. What I saw froze me. 3 men. None of them were Elias. None were the ones I'd seen before. These were strangers, well-dressed, stiff posture, sharp expressions. 2 were seated on the couch. The third stood near the wall with a tablet in his hand, showing the others something. On the coffee table were documents, stacks of them, some with my name on top. My name, my signature, my old work ID badge. My blood ran cold. They were going through my records. They were talking about me. That's when I heard her voice. Corinne, clear as day, from the hallway inside. She sounded calm. Too calm. He was never supposed to look into this. I told you, he doesn't have the spine for it. One of the men replied, you should have shut it down when he left. And then she said it. The sentence that shattered everything I thought I understood. He'll disappear soon. He always disappears when things get hard. I stumbled back, heart jackhammering, my breath shallow and fast. That's when the porch light flicked on, not the motion sensor, not by chance. Someone turned it on manually. I didn't look back. I ran. Through the yard, down the block, through the gap between the bushes near the park. I didn't stop until I was 4 streets away, hidden behind an electrical box, crouching in the dark, gasping for air like I was drowning. She wasn't just indifferent. She wasn't just done with the marriage. Corinne, my wife, the woman I trusted with every piece of my fragile soul, was orchestrating something. Using my name. Feeding strangers information. Planning my absence as if it was just another errand. I got back to the motel by 2 a.m., soaked in sweat, shaking. I pulled the curtains shut, pushed the dresser in front of the door, and sat on the floor with my back to the wall. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I just kept replaying her voice in my head, over and over. He'll disappear soon. She didn't sound angry. She sounded certain. That was the part that scared me most. The next morning, I checked out of the motel. I used a different name. Paid in cash. I drove 3 counties over and parked at a rest stop where no one knew me, where I wasn't someone's husband, someone's problem, someone's unfinished story. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to keep moving. But when I checked my email later that night, from an old burner account I hadn't touched in years, I saw something new in the inbox. One message. No subject. Just a single sentence. If you want to stay alive, stop asking questions. I stared at the message for nearly an hour, my finger hovering over the delete key, like pushing it would make this whole thing vanish. If you want to stay alive, stop asking questions. 10 words. No punctuation. No signature. No trace of a sender. But the weight of those words was immense. Not vague. Not metaphorical, stay alive. Whoever wrote this wasn't being poetic. They were delivering a fact. A certainty. I logged out. Wiped the device. Tossed the burner phone into the nearest gas station trash can and drove without a destination, changing highways whenever I felt watched. I didn't sleep that night. I pulled into an all-night diner and sat in a booth by the window, nursing a bitter cup of coffee and pretending I was just another tired traveler passing through. In reality, I was a man with no direction, no answers, and a growing fear that my own wife had set something in motion that I wasn't supposed to survive. At dawn, I checked into a roadside motel off a forgotten exit in upstate Pennsylvania. The room was grim, brown carpet, floral drapes, a TV with missing buttons, but it had a lock and a deadbolt. That was all I needed. I shut myself in and began piecing everything together on scraps of paper, like a mad and building a puzzle no one asked for. The envelope. The photograph. The shadow figures in my old house. The wing tattoo. The email. Her words. He always disappears when things get hard. She wanted me gone. Not just emotionally, physically, completely. And the deeper I thought about it, the more I remembered subtle things from our marriage that hadn't made sense at the time, but now pulsed with a sinister light. The fake bill she once said had been handled. The time she insisted I stop using a particular credit card, claiming it had been compromised. The brief window 2 years ago when my medical records mysteriously had a data entry error and listed me as having a condition I'd never been diagnosed with. I thought they were bureaucratic mistakes. Now I wasn't so sure. And then, around noon, someone knocked on my motel door. Not a polite knock. Not the hesitant shuffle of a maid or a fellow guest looking for ice. This knock was sharp, heavy, 3 distinct hits. The kind of knock that comes from someone who expects to be obeyed. I didn't breathe. I stood silently, steps from the door, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard through the wood. I peeked through the grimy peephole. No one was there. I waited. Nothing. After 10 minutes of stillness, I finally unlocked the door and opened it a crack. On the concrete in front of the room lay a folded newspaper. Just like the envelope before, it didn't look out of place at first glance. But tucked inside, there was another photo. This one printed in color. It was me, taken from behind, standing at the diner, looking out the window. Timestamp 6 hours earlier. I dropped it. Someone had been following me. Close enough to photograph. Close enough to leave this at my door without being heard or seen. The newspaper itself was local, dated that morning, which meant they were here. Now, panic doesn't feel like in the movies. It's not a sudden scream or sprint. It's cold. It seeps in. It tells you quietly that you are no longer safe anywhere. I packed what little I had and ran. Left the car behind. Took a cab to the next town, then a bus even farther. At every stop, I stared at faces. Every pair of eyes. Every phone held too steadily in my direction. My skin itched with paranoia I didn't know how to scrub off. Eventually, I checked into a rundown Airbnb under a fake name. Used cash. No phone. No Wi-Fi. I sat in a room lit only by daylight and silence and thought, what did I miss? What did I ignore all these years? That's when I remembered something buried deep in the past, a document Corinne once asked me to sign. Early in our marriage. She told me it was for life insurance updates, part of a long-term financial plan. I didn't read it. I trusted her. I signed it. And now I was starting to suspect that piece of paper might be the very reason someone wanted me erased. The only way to find out was to return to the one place I swore I'd never go again, our old storage unit. The place where she kept our papers and tax junk, the one place I knew she'd never think I'd remember, because I never cared about it. But I remembered the lock code. I remembered everything now. If there were answers anywhere, it was in that metal box of forgotten files and sealed boxes. But I had no idea that once I opened that storage unit, the last piece of my past would crumble and the truth would turn from painful to criminal. I arrived at the storage facility just after dusk. It sat on the edge of a small industrial park, a gray, unremarkable building with endless rows of metal doors, each hiding someone's forgotten life. I pulled my hoodie low and waited for the office clerk to disappear inside before making my way to Unit 117. My palms were sweating. My heart was a mess of thumps and questions. But I remembered the code, Corinne's birthday, of course, for digits that used to mean celebration and cake. Now they felt like a riddle wrapped in barbed wire. The lock popped open easier than I expected. The metal door creaked up, revealing a dark, dusty space filled with boxes, old furniture, files, a broken lamp, the couch we threw out after our dog peed on it too many times. And in the corner, a locked black file cabinet I hadn't seen in years. I pried it open using the flat end of a tire iron I'd brought just in case. Inside were folders, binders, receipts, and then a small brown envelope marked simply with my name. I opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, a copy of the very life insurance document I'd signed years ago. But this wasn't just any policy. It listed Corinne as the sole beneficiary, with a massive payout that had increased steadily over time. But here's the part that made my stomach lurch, the clause underlined in red ink. Payable in full upon the death of the policyholder under any circumstances, accidental or otherwise. No medical checks. No questions. It had been modified just 18 months ago. Suddenly, everything made sense. The coldness. The men. The forged medical records. The files they were studying in our living room like schematics for a demolition. They weren't just trying to erase me emotionally. They were preparing to erase me entirely. But that's not where the story ends. Buried deeper in the cabinet, I found a USB drive in a small envelope labeled for Logan only. I recognized that name. It was her new partner, the man from the grocery store. Apparently, he had no idea what he was truly involved in. Curiosity took over. I borrowed a library computer that night and opened the drive. What I found changed everything. Recordings. Dozens of them. Secret audio files from conversations in our house, in her car, and even one that captured a heated argument between Corinne and Elias, the tattooed man. In one file, she screams at him, "I told you I'd get the money, but not like this. Not through him. I'm not killing anyone." And he replies, coldly, "You already started. Now finish it." It wasn't just fraud. It was a setup. One Corinne had been pulled into, reluctantly, maybe, but one that was now spiraling beyond her control. She wasn't the mastermind. She was being used too. And that changed everything inside me. I wasn't the only one being erased. I did the only thing I could do. I walked into the local FBI field office the next day with the envelope, the drive, and every photo, document, and file I'd collected. I expected skepticism, dismissal, maybe even to be turned away. But within 10 minutes of seeing the contents, the agent on duty called in 3 more. They didn't just believe me. They'd been waiting for something like this. Apparently, Elias, real name Elias Donovan, was already on a watch list, tied to financial crimes and suspected disappearances across multiple states. They had nothing concrete. Until now. The investigation moved quickly after that. Corinne was brought in for questioning. At first, she denied everything. But once she realized Elias had turned on her, used her, recorded her, threatened her, she broke. She flipped. And in doing so, she helped bring down a larger operation involving identity fraud, staged deaths, and illegal insurance claims. It didn't make her innocent, but it made her human again. Corinne took a plea deal and entered witness protection under federal supervision. The life I had with her? Gone. Legally. Emotionally. Completely. But somehow, it didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like survival. Months later, I moved to a different state. I got a new job doing something quiet, honest, small. I adopted a dog from a shelter, an old golden retriever with bad hips and sad eyes. Named him Murphy. He's never far from my side. And the best part? I feel something again. Not for her. Not for what we were. But for me. For mornings without fear. For coffee that doesn't come with dread. For peace that's quiet in all the right ways. So yeah, I disappeared. But not the way they wanted. I disappeared from their plan and reappeared in a life that's finally mine.